What is going on, lords and ladies? BN is back again today for another IK video. And today we're going to switch it up a little bit. We're going to talk about the state of Infinity Kingdom, the kind of server meta that we're seeing develop, and really just talk about some big things right now in the game, at least for where it is currently. And maybe as we go along the process, we'll hopefully shed some light on some things and hopefully give a lot of players watching this some perspective on kingdom builders, on what's happening right now in IK, right? The kind of the good, the bad, the areas of improvement, things that we like, and really just give some good facts. Because I think it's always a great thing anytime you're getting invested into a new game, right? Especially if it's in beta, right? Because you know a lot of things can still change, improvements can still be made, and it's always good, in my opinion, to kind of do these assessments and these reviews. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start out looking at the first like 5 to 6 servers right now. And we're going to look at how they're developing, what some of the challenges are that we're noticing and we're seeing. And then I also want to compare it to our experience that we had on server 6. Because I think a lot of it really speaks to the overall server meta. And let me start with this before we even dive in. For those of you who have played Kingdom Builders before, right? As I have, I've played other ones too, and I'm sure some of you out there have as well. You know, for the experienced players, people that have played for a while, you know that in other games, the objective is usually preparing your kingdom for what comes after you capture the final objective on the kingdom, or in this case, on the server. Right. In this game, it's the World Heart. Right. That's the final objective on the Chronicles. That's the final big objective to capture on the server. And then we don't know what happens after. Right. But in other games, you know what comes after. And usually you are preparing the kingdom to try to be unified, to not have constant wars all the time. Right. Because you know the most important thing is like server versus server, kingdom versus kingdom. Right? You want as many active players to remain in your kingdom, so that way, or server, so that way when these big cross-server, cross-kingdom events happen, you have more active and higher powered players than the other kingdom, right? So you can win these big events. Now, in IK, that's not here yet, right? We don't know if server versus server, kingdom versus kingdom will be coming, but I think it's safe to say that it has to be something that is on the game and the developers' minds, right? It almost feels like it would be, somewhat inconceivable to not assume that they at least know about it, right? That they're familiar with these mechanics and these features. So under that guise is kind of how we'll continue talking about what we're going to show you guys in IK right now. And the last example I'll give you before we do dive in is, right, the servers, in my opinion, who really get this down earlier than later are potentially going to be the ones to reap the benefits and reap the most rewards if and when they come out with server versus server or kingdom versus kingdom, depending on how they title it, right? Or anything like that in between, right? Or even if there's some kind of post-kingdom event that happens after the World Heart is captured, right? Servers that are able to figure out how to retain the most amount of active players and unify the kingdom early so they can have higher levels of engagement are really the ones who are going to reap those benefits. And so far, no server has done that yet. So let's go down kind of history lane, and I want to talk about, let's start with server 1. So I'm going to give you guys some stats real quick. So in server 1, right, let's start off looking at, this server's 308 days old. Excuse me, 259 days old, different stat. 259 days old server 1 is. Right, let's look at the rankings real quick. So the power distribution that you see, right, it's pretty sparse, right? You have 43 for blue, 36 for red, 25 for green, and then you have the extreme drop off at number 4 and 5 and so on at 6 mil, right? If we look at overall player activity, right, this comes in at about 308 plus or minus players, right? And that's if you're just adding up the members here from 1, 2, and 3, and then you're also factoring in the extreme drop-off, right? So you have about 308 active players, right, like solid core active players in the kingdom right now. Now let's take a look at the map. In server 1, right, it's pretty sparse, pretty random. For the most part, blue and green have the best cities. You can notice red doesn't even have a capital. Blue and green have about 4 or 5 capitals split between them. Green has 5. Blue has 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? 4 capitals split between that, right? So red's kind of non-existent. So that's what happened in server 1. You can tell they lost activity probably a lot more from red, mainly because they weren't the ones to get any of the cities. And then, again, based on the active numbers as well, there's probably a lot of fighting, and that's most likely why people left. Right, and I'm sure among other factors as well. Let's take a look at server 2, and as you can tell, I kind of have all these accounts that I have leveled here, which is always fantastic. And let's go into, where am I going? S2 next. Okay. So let's load up S2, and let's take a look at server 2 and see what they have. So now, server 2's power disparity is a little, I don't want to say worse, but it's less than server 1. And we're going to take a look at that here right now on the rankings. So let's go to rankings, and you'll see 32 mil, 18, and then the extreme drop-off at 5, right? And even the next highest powered red is 5. So you really have mainly green presence with some blue. If you take a look at their player activity, excuse me, let me look there, right? So you have, right, 50, 68, right? Their core player activity is about 147, plus or minus is what I average it. Then we get into how does the map look, right? So basically all green, blue second most, red third most, pretty standard, right? But in this case, green has basically taken over, which means that for blue and red players, they either would have to switch factions or they continue playing with low-level cities. Most players aren't going to want to do that, right? So it's pretty clear how this server basically lost activity and probably died, or at least is near dead. Now let's go ahead and take, and server 2 is 216 days old, right? So server 2 came out 43 days after server 1. Now let's look at, excuse me, server 3. I'm just noticing my server 5 account. I might have to level up. Hopefully not, because I thought I had everything prepared before the video started, but we'll see. So let's dive into server 3. Now server 3 is really interesting, because I don't really know what happened in server 3, but I'm going to show you guys and try to maybe piece together some form of what my opinion is. So, server 3 alliance power, really low, right? 169 days, this kingdom, for its history or how old it is, right? And this kingdom came out 47 days after server 2. So, it actually came out longer than when server 2 came out after server 1, right? By 4 days. Now, power is really low. Activity numbers are actually a little bit higher than server 2, surprisingly. They have about 189, right, at plus or minus core activity. But then if you look at the map, right, nothing's been captured. It's almost like people came in here, spent like 1 or 2 weeks, and then dipped. Like, I don't know what happened with server 3. I'd have to ask someone about it. The only thing I can think of is maybe just constant war or something, I don't know, something that happened that just did not have players playing as much, or maybe they just weren't progressing that fast back then. I don't know really what the answer is. I just found it really weird. So, but then now let's go ahead and take a look at server 4, right? So, server 4 is probably the next most active server, right? So out of the first 4 servers, server 4 has the most activity. It's a little above server 1. So we'll zoom out. We'll take a look. And you can see here off the rankings that 59, 42, 34, and then you have the drop-off that really starts at 4. But you still have wide disparity from 1 to 2. You have a 17 mil gap, and then from 1 to 3, you have a 25 mil gap, right? So really wide. But the activity numbers here are between 330 and 498 is what I average it at. And again, that's plus or minus on either the low or the high end. Now, if you look at the how old this kingdom is. This is 112 days old. So this kingdom came out 57 days after server 3, right? So you would imagine the new servers opening would be less time, right? But again, it's still beta, so things I'm sure are fluctuating, right? The numbers will start actually increasing once we get to server 5 and 6 and 7, and you'll see that. So let's take a look at the map. And now the map for server 4 it looks beautiful. I want to point that out. Right, server 4, in my opinion, has the best template for what I believe a server should and could look like. Now, again, they don't have the active numbers that you'll see in server 5. They don't have the active numbers you'll see in server 6, and I'm sure arguably server 7 as well. And I'm sure there's reasons for that, but for them, and really the only thing I can think of is that maybe they just have a lot of war, maybe players are doing whatever, maybe kill event is ruining them. I'm not sure exactly why the activity numbers are seeming lower in server 4 when, in my opinion, they have a great setup. Maybe they don't have a council setup. Maybe they're, again, who knows? Hopefully maybe there's access to server mail or King's Mail after World Heart is captured. Right, there's a lot of unknowns still about the game, which is awesome. But again, I think template-wise, server 4 is fantastic. And this is even something I'd love to emulate. But just with, again, right, improvements in certain areas and things like that without knowing too much. Now let's get to server 5, which... Let's see here what we have. Where's my S5 scout? So, okay. So level 7, I might have to boost this to 5 real quick. Sorry, to 10 real quick. I actually thought I already had this loaded up. Oh, let's see where I'm at. Okay, no, I'm good. Awesome. So, let's take a look now at how, let me zoom out real quick. So let me take a look right now at how server 5. So server 5 is 63 days old. This is where my buddy Yore plays, so shout out to Yore and Ragnarok there for MG. Right, if you're looking for a dope alliance to join, there you go. Anyways, server 5 came out 63 days old, right? So server 5 came out 49 days after server 4, meaning that there's a +8 increase, or I guess a -8 increase on how fast the next server came out, right? So this server, right, if you look at the power gap, right, still really active, right? Again, huge power disparities from 1 to 2 and 1 to 3 and really 1 and so on. And then the disparity from like 2 downward as well, which I think in this game you can really expect like the top 3 alliances to probably be equal in power, and then number 4 and 6 should probably be pretty equal in power or as far as the ranges. But 67, 46, 39, even if you look at 6 to 10, right, it really starts dropping like when you get to 7 and then down to 10. But for the most part, right, they still have great activity here, right? I estimate that there's probably 1,000 active players on this server, give or take, right, which is still fantastic. But the disparity from the number 1 alliance down is pretty steep, right? 21 mil from 1 to 2, and then 20, what is that, 7... No, hold on, 4, 6, yeah, 7, 28 mil from 1 to 3, right? And if you look at the map, right, Red has basically taken arguably almost all the capital cities, right? Only one they really need left is Kratos, I think, here. Let's see if they need anything else. Kratos, oh no, and then Daphne, it looks like. So, who knows? They're probably working their way, but they already have all the 9. And they already have a couple of the other 7s as well that they've upgraded to 8. So it's pretty clear that Red is already in a position, right, to start working. And they have started Contention of Relics will be starting, I think, on the 8th. So I'm actually going to be tuning in and trying to do a video on this server when it starts, just to give you guys some footage of what it looks like for people that are going for Relics and World Heart, because I know this is one of the first that we're seeing. I think there's another server as well. I think Yori had mentioned to me there's like 2 or 3 servers actually that are getting ready for Contention. But still, right, great opportunity, but the challenge still is that because Red is basically taking over, who knows who else is going to stay, right? I'm sure it's a matter of time before Green and Blue potentially either start dwindling activity, they decide to go to Red, or they just leave for a new server, right? Just because of how it looks right now. And again, this is just my opinion. Now let's go ahead and let's take a look at server 6. Right, so server 6 is where we started in for our first server, and now server 6 is 42 days old. It came out, or I'm sorry, it's 21 days old. It came 42 days after server 5, right? So right now server 6 has the record, right? The previous record was server 2 at 43 days after server 1. Server 6 is 42 days, so 1 day faster after server 5. So let's take a look at the map, right, and see how it looks right now for server 6. So, I'm sorry, the rankings. So rankings are still pretty tight. Server 6 still has great activity, right? 33, 30, 26, 25. You look at 6 through 10, right, and then you'll see it starts dropping off at like the 19 through 15. But again, keep in mind, the server is only 21 days old. So again, right, great activity, right? I estimate there's probably about 1,500 to maybe 2,000 players that are actively playing server 6 still. When we look at the map, though, however, right, you can see that red is, right, they have about half the map right now currently, right? They're still pushing south, right? They're still setting up for other cities, right? They've already taken a couple pieces from green and blue in the bottom left and bottom right corners. And the trend right now is that red is going to be, the dominating faction on the server, similar for what will probably happen in server that happened in server 5 that we'll probably see happen in server 6, right? As you'll see some blue and some green, activity will start dropping. They might move over to the red faction, or they just may consider abandoning the account and then going and trying a new server, right? So let me now go with server 7. I'm just going to briefly show server 7 just because it's really new, but I want to show it because it does have its own kind of purpose. So server 7 is 9 days old. Server 7 has the record right now. They opened 12 days after server 6. Now, I don't know if we're going to see server 8 open 12 days after server 7 open, because that would be 3 days from now, I think on January 10th, right? I'm really estimating probably a week or two, because to go from averaging about 42 to 50 days for new servers to 12 days for a new server, in my opinion, is just too fast, right? I feel like they should have stayed on server 6 a little bit longer, but if they had great numbers already, like, again, and that's the thing, we don't know how that works on the back end, right? What's the goal? For some games I've played, right, sometimes they want 20,000 players to join a server, right? 20,000 new players to join a server, or 10,000 new players to join a server before they open another one, right? I don't know how IK works that, if they have a number in mind that they track, and then once they hit that number, they open a new server, which I would imagine that's probably at least a factor, but we just don't know the details. So let me break down kind of how server 7 is shaping up and looking, right? Pretty spread out, pretty split right now for the most part. And it looks like the power distribution is okay, right? You have a blue, a green, and a red at top, right? With only about a 3.5 mil difference between 1 and 3. So it's not that bad, right? Again, we'll see where it goes. But now I want to round out, because I know we're coming up at about 20 minutes here. And I want to just talk about, real quick, after showing you these stats and walking you through each of the servers on where we're currently at, is the trend at the moment is that because the servers, when they open, it's basically at some point in time, depending on how early or late it starts, there are wars, right? There are constant fighting that happens. And the trend we've seen from server 1 to server 4 is that because of this, because of the drop-off, because of the constant fighting, I'm sure Kill Event has a lot to do with that as well, because of new players joining, that this could be their first kingdom builder they're playing, because the servers don't have gated tier, like province areas, right? In other games I've played, you have like a zone 1, a zone 2, and a zone 3, and it's gated, right? So, like, the example would be if each of these provinces, like, let's say you could only start out in 4 provinces, top left, top right, or bottom left, right? Or you could only start out in a province that has like a level 5 capital city. I mean, just something like that, right? Or you just say the perimeter provinces, and you could choose where you start. But you can't access the next tier, like, until you have to, like, battle a gate, right? Like, you basically would have to siege a gate like you siege a city, right? And when you get access to that gate, and there could be multiple gates, then you can get access to the next zone, for example, right? So you would have to attack a gate here to get access to Hayat, right? If you start here in Nirasu. So just as an example, because that is not in IK, and IK you can go wherever you want from day one, right? You can attack anything. And because of that, it lends itself to a little bit more volatility in the servers, right? Where anyone can attack anyone. So the idea in probably most players' minds in how IK is set up at the moment is we need to be number one faction, number one alliance, or have the top alliances in our faction, right? However it works, but that's most likely the thought that is going through the majority of players' minds. And the repercussions of that we're seeing now, that we've already seen so far with the trend, is that when that happens, and you have a faction or an alliance that just top loads, if you will, and there's no strides being made on the server for levels of unification or balance, you're seeing players leave. And that is going to keep happening until either some changes are made, if changes are made, right, on how server layout is or gating certain provinces, or if players are just coming together. And it has to be something that is on a player end, right? It has to be players that are taking the initiative to form things like an early council, right? Reach out to players for diplomatic reasons, and really make a proactive attempts of taking some initiative to keep the server activity retained and player retention as much as they can, because otherwise, over time, you're going to keep seeing the same similar trend of servers losing activity because of these reasons, and then eventually either dying or just becoming extremely low, or having extremely low activity. So anyways, I hope this helps, like me just explaining some of this to some new players who may not understand like why you're seeing these trends, why these things are happening this way. For veteran players, I'm sure you guys appreciate me just kind of giving you some stat breakdowns, because you probably already know what I know based on how you're seeing the trends of servers, and then how the game is set up right now, right? It really tends to, anytime a new server is coming out, it's almost like it's just the opportunity for volatility is already there day one, right? Because of just how the kingdom map is set up, and how you can access anything and everything, and then also based on what players' perceptions are of what they want to do, right? Like if your alliance or your faction wins the war, what are you really winning at the end, right? Like you might have won the war, but the result is you're losing an extreme amount of server activity. And that for a lot of players can become boring if you don't see a lot of activity in chats and world chat or kingdom chat. For some players, if there's not a lot of people to go and attack, you're going to get bored. And again, these are just additional things that we're seeing. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I tried to keep it to about 20 minutes because there was a lot of information I wanted to provide. And until next time, man, have fun playing IK, because I sure am.